Welcome back, everyone. No matter where you are, no matter what time it may be, I hope y'all are doing well out there. Before I get into these encounters, I need to make something clear. It seems lately the emails have just become darker and darker as we go. I'm not sure what's happening right now, but I'm just gonna roll with it. Every one of these you're about to hear comes from a person who should not have walked away from this situation alive. These aren't your, I saw a dogman in the trees and I ran back to my truck situations. These are close calls. These are ones where people were one bad second away from never going home again. And what makes these encounters different is what happened afterward. The theme of this upload will become apparent very soon. Every single one of these situations, once the creature is gone or the person managed to escape, someone else showed up. Men who weren't supposed to be there. Trucks that don't belong to any local departments. People who knew exactly what they were walking into and exactly what to say to keep the witness quiet. I'm not here to tell you what happened or what didn't. I'm not here to tell you who they are, or none of that. I'm just telling you what these folks have told me. So sit back, everyone, get comfortable, and listen to this one very closely. These folks got a little too close, and they lived long enough to figure out that the creature, the Dogman, isn't the only thing that we need to be afraid of. Before I jump in, if you're listening and you've had an encounter of your own and would like to share it here on the channel, be sure and reach out to me. Send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. My email address will be linked in the description below the video. Alright, legends, lock in, and let's begin. Everyone grab a drink, lock your doors and windows, hit the lights, and let's get started. Reels. I really appreciate you responding to my email. I'm only going to do this because I've tried to convince myself many times that it was just a fall, like they told me. I've been packing this around since 1994, and I think it's about time someone besides me knows what really happened. Back then I was 23. I was living outside Sandpoint, Idaho. I hunted constantly. Back then, you either hunted, fished, logged, or you went broke. I'd already tagged my buck earlier in the season, so when my younger brother asked me to go with him one afternoon to help him find something, I went just to get out of the house. Back then, I had an old '78 Chevy pickup. We took it up a forest road that I'd been using since I was in high school. It was rutted out, pretty slow going. It was a road you would feel every rock through the floorboards. It was pretty rough. About 4 or 5 miles up, we saw a brand new orange sign tied to the gate. It wasn't there ever before. It was new. It said area subject to closure, active wildlife management, USFS/USDA. Now that felt strange because back then they didn't post temporary closure signs unless logging was going on or sometimes if they were trying to push elk out on an area. But I didn't see any sign of people being there. There were no tracks, no equipment, there were no fresh tire prints. There was nothing. The gate was open, so we just kept going. We split up about 3 miles in that gate. My brother dropped downhill to still hunt through the cedars, and I walked a spur road along a ridge. The plan was simple. He'd loop down and around. I would circle high, and we'd meet back at the truck before dark. The afternoon felt fine. It was pretty cold out, but not unbearable. There was a tiny bit of snow on the ground and shaded spots. I saw a couple of does, but nothing worth calling out. The only strange thing was a smell that drifted in every now and then. It was wet dog mixed with a metallic tang. I figured something had died nearby. About an hour before sunset, I got to a narrow stretch where the spur hugs the side of the ridge. Sheer drop-off on my right, straight cut bank on my left. The kind of spot where you don't want to linger very long. That's when I noticed the ground. Dirt and snow were all torn up. These weren't paw prints, it was just churned earth, like something big had run through there. My first thought was, that's a big elk. I took a few steps and something cracked hard above me. A rock the size of a bowling ball came slamming down out of the cut bank, smashed into the road just a few feet from my boots, and rolled off the edge. I jumped back, my heart was hammering. At first I thought frost had broken something loose, but when I looked up, I saw a hand. This wasn't a bear paw, this wasn't a human hand. It was long, thick fingers, a hand with curved claws hooked into a root sticking out of the dirt. Something was climbing down the cut bank deliberately, and it was quiet. Before I could move, it dropped onto the road with a large thump that did not match the sound its body should have made. It landed easy, like it weighed a lot, but carried itself well. I know that's confusing, but that's what I saw. I'll never forget how this thing looked. It was easily over 7 feet, maybe taller. The chest was thick, and its arms hung down past the knee section, which was completely bent the wrong direction. Its fur looked dark brown, and it had streaks of gray and black, reminded me of a coyote. The head just doesn't sit right. It was shaped like a wolf, but too expressive. It was too aware. Its ears were up high, it had a long snout. Its jaw was thick. It looked like this thing could bite through a car hood. Its eyes weren't glowing either. They weren't some mystical shade of amber. They were just a flat yellow, and they were staring straight through me. There was no warning growl, no sound at all. It just stepped toward me fast, faster than anything living should be able to move, especially on 2 legs. I tried to lift my rifle, but there was just no time. It hit me square in the chest with its arm, and that's the last clear moment I remember before I went over the side. I don't really remember hitting the ground. I just remember branches, pain, rolling, the sky flipping in and out. I must have hit my head because everything after that comes in pieces. I remember looking up the hill and seeing it standing on the road above me. It wasn't leaving, it was looking at me, like it was waiting to see if I got back up. I heard something in the distance. It was an engine, an older truck climbing the road. The thing looked toward the sound, almost annoyed that it wasn't going to be able to finish me. Then it dropped to all fours for a step or two, sniffed around my rifle, grabbed it, tossed it into the brush like trash, and then just trotted off along the road, away from the oncoming engine. That truck definitely saved my life. Anyone that says these things are friendly or they're not out to harm us, think again. The next thing I remember is voices screaming, a flashlight in my face, and being lifted onto a backboard. My ribs were on fire, my shoulder felt like it had been torn halfway off. Someone said he's alive, and someone else said, don't let him move his neck. I tried to tell them something hit me, but they just said don't try to talk. When we reached the hospital, they told me I had 3 broken ribs, a dislocated shoulder, a concussion, and a ton of cuts and bruises. They kept saying I fell. I kept trying to explain I didn't fall, I was hit. No one would write that down. The next morning, this is where it gets really strange. A man came into my room wearing a plain jacket. There was no patches, no USFS badge, there was nothing. He introduced himself as working with Wildlife Services. He gave me no name, just that. He carried a small notebook, not the kind a doctor would use, an old leather backing thing. He said, "Walk me through what you think happened." I told him everything. The hand, the rock, the creature dropping onto the road, the hit, the fall, everything I could remember. He did not write a single word of it down. When I finished, he told me, "Given where you were, and the ground conditions, you most likely were charged by a black bear. It happens fast. People get confused." I told him I knew what a bear looked like. I'm not stupid. He gave me this small, tight smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "You took a heavy hit to the head. Your mind is going to fill in the blanks. The important thing is that this will be documented as a bear incident on federal land. That way, everyone stays out of trouble. You shouldn't have been back there." That's all he kept talking about. We had ignored the gate. He was angry because we had passed by that sign. Everyone, not everything, everyone stays out of trouble. He then asked for my clothing, said they were contaminated with biological material, and they'd dispose of them properly. That phrase just stuck in my head. What the hell? Biological material. Like I'd fallen into a vat of chemicals. He didn't ask. He expected compliance. Later, when my brother came to see me, he told me something worse. When he got back to the truck that night, the entire pull-off was lit up with vehicles. A county sheriff's Bronco. There were 2 dark Suburbans with no plates. A white utility truck with a tall camper shell and a long antenna. A man in a green uniform, not county, not sheriff, blocked him from getting close and told him the area was closed for wildlife control operations. My brother said, "My brother's truck is right there." The man answered without hesitating, "He's at the hospital. He's alive. That's all you need to know. You can leave now." No explanations, no questions were allowed, no asking how he knew who I was. Later that week, the Forest Service gate at the bottom of that road was locked with a chain and 2 new signs hung on it. Road closed, unsafe conditions, no public access, federal operations. No storm, no slide, no reason. A retired game warden my uncle knew told him quietly over some coffee, not in uniform, of course, that my incident had been classified differently. And it was being handled by people above his pay grade. Then he told him I was lucky that I walked away. He didn't say walked away from a fall, he said he. Like they knew what it was. It's been almost 30 years now, and all I can tell you for sure is this. What hit me was not a bear. What I saw was not a hallucination. And the men who showed up afterward did not act confused. They acted prepared. Like they'd been waiting for something like that to happen again. Appreciate it. Anonymous. Northern Idaho. Incident 1994. Hey, Reels. My name is not something you'll need, I don't think. If you end up reading this, you can just use my grandpa's name. He's dead and gone. Just call me Harlan. I was 28 when this happened, and this was back in 1982, so you can imagine how long I've dealt with this. I don't live in Mississippi anymore, and I doubt I ever will again. I left 6 months after this incident, and I never went back for more than a weekend to visit my family. I'm telling you this because my wife says talking about it might help, but I don't think she realizes it wasn't the creature that ruined me. It was what happened after the sighting. It's hard enough to see something that isn't supposed to be real, but seeing what comes after is much worse. Back then, I lived in a little town outside of Hattiesburg. I worked nights at a sawmill, and most of my buddies were from either the mill or the volunteer fire department. My closest friend was a guy we'll call Wyatt. He was a year older than me, ex-Army. Now this guy could fix anything with duct tape and a pair of pliers. He and I spent most weekends frog gigging or spotlighting hogs off old county roads, back before private land was locked down tight like it is today. It was a hot July night. The air was thick and we were driving a dead-end road past Purvis. The whole plan was just to blow off steam, drive some dirt roads, drink some beer, and shine the ditches for hogs or coyotes. Both of us were off shift, and we were tired of smelling like chainsaw gas and sawdust. The sun had already set when we got onto the gravel stretch. There was nothing that I would say was unusual that night. The humidity was so heavy you could chew it. The first weird thing that I can recall was the radio started hissing. It was not antenna static. It was a deep, low interference buzz that rattled the dash. Wyatt smacked the radio a few times with his hand, said something about cheap wiring, but the static did not stop. It just got louder. 5 minutes later, the temperature inside the car dropped. I don't mean it was a cool breeze. It got cold. My arms started prickling up like someone opened a freezer. I even wiped the windshield thinking maybe fog was building on the inside. It wasn't. Wyatt finally said, Did I ever tell you I hate this road? He never mentioned anything like that before. The second strange thing happened right then. A deer shot across the road in front of us, almost close enough to hit, but it wasn't running like a normal deer. It was stumbling, jerking its head around like it didn't know where its legs were supposed to go. We both saw something behind it. It was just a shadow, some movement. It was too fast for us to process. Whatever was chasing that deer was not running like a man or an animal. Wyatt slowed down instead of speeding up. That's the kind of man he was. Always thinking he could handle a situation if he just kept his eyes open long enough. I just told him to don't stop. Whatever that was, just do not stop. But he did. He rolled forward, slow, shining the spotlight across the ditch. The beam hit the eyes first. I saw a set of the widest set, deepest eyes that I've ever seen in my life. They were tilted forward like they belonged to something that built to stare through your soul. The beam slid down and hit the shape. I've been trying for 4 decades to explain this, and the only way I can put it is this. It looked like a wolf stood up on legs that did not belong to a wolf, but a person. Its arms looked like a person as well, but they definitely belonged to something else entirely. It wasn't as tall as some people make it out to be, or at least this one wasn't. It was maybe 6, 7 feet at most, but it was broad. Shoulders like an oil drum turned sideways. Its chest was thick enough to crack a door frame. Its fur looked patchy in the light. It was darker toward the head and lighter toward the belly, but not soft-looking. It was coarse, like winter coat fur on a coyote, only a lot thicker. The part that really got burned into my mind is the way it moved its head. It was very calculating with its movements, and very slow. It tilted like it was trying to figure us out, or trying to decide what it should do next. It was definitely not surprised we were there. It seemed mildly annoyed. I remember me and Wyatt both at the same time saying, "What the hell?" That thing lifted one arm, not like it was going to attack, it just raised it slightly like a person shading their eyes from the light. When it did, I saw its stomach fully, and something inside me dropped like falling down an elevator shaft. It took a step toward the car, and that was the end of it for Wyatt. He slammed the shifter into reverse without saying a word. He took off, pretty sure it was on the floor. The whole vehicle shuddered, and we fishtailed backwards down the road. When he finally got traction, he threw it into drive and floored it again. That should have been the end, but it was not. Because as soon as we hit the paved county road again, 2 headlights flipped on behind us. Bright, perfect circles like whoever owned them had been waiting with their engine off, watching. A dark sedan, an older model, big-bodied, maybe a Crown Vic or a Caprice. It's hard to tell in the dark. It didn't chase us at first, it just followed us. There were no sirens, no flashing lights, just that steady, creeping tail. Back then, of course, we didn't have cell phones. The only plan was get to town, get near other people, and catch our breath. About a mile from the city limits, the sedan flashed its high beams once. Only once. Wyatt slowed, thinking maybe it was a sheriff's deputy. The sedan passed us immediately, pulled sideways across the road and blocked the lane. 2 men got out. Not locals. These weren't cops or deputies. They weren't anyone from Lamar County, Forest County, or anywhere nearby. They were wearing dark suits, white shirts, no badges I could see, no credentials. They didn't have hats. They were both clean-cut, one was older, one was younger. They walked straight to the driver's side of our car. The older one tapped the glass with a knuckle and said, "Turn off the engine, boys." Not gentlemen, not fellas, boys, like he already knew our ages. Wyatt rolled down the window maybe an inch. He said I didn't do anything wrong, and who are you anyway? The older man just smiled at us, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "You 2 were on County Road 418, he said. It wasn't a question either. "Yes, sir," I answered him. I don't know why I answered. Something about him made it impossible not to. He said there's been an incident. Wildlife, you hit something and lost control. "No, we didn't," Wyatt said. Before he could say anything else, he got cut off. The younger man stepped closer, leaned down, and said through the glass, "You hit something. That's what happened. Do you understand?" His voice was smooth, practiced, like he'd said that same line 100 times before. The older one stepped in and added, "There's going to be a report. Your vehicle will show damage. You will confirm it was a guardrail. You will not mention anything else." Wyatt opened his mouth to argue. I kicked the back of his seat. A warning to shut up. I knew we were in a situation that we could not weasel out of easily. Something about those 2 made every instinct in me scream. Don't push these guys. The younger one leaned down farther. "Is there anything on your person that does not belong to you? Anything you picked up, touched, photographed, or removed from the scene?" This was 1982. No one had a camera on them. No one took souvenirs. We both just shook our heads, just not knowing what to think. They stepped back, and the older one said, "Good, go home. Don't drive this way again, and if you're smart, you'll forget the part you think you saw." He added something that still makes me sick. "It wasn't meant for you." They got back in their sedan and pulled off the road and let us pass. Wyatt didn't speak for 10 minutes. When he finally did, he said we didn't hit a damn guardrail. We just drove the rest of the way home in silence. The next morning, his Ford had new scratches along the driver's side. They were deep, running front to back. I hadn't noticed them the night before. He swore they weren't there earlier in the day. 2 days later, a deputy stopped by his house and handed him a typed-up report from a form with the words, "Single vehicle incident, minor damage, cause, guardrail impact." We never gave a statement. We never filed anything. We never spoke to any sheriff's deputy. But there it was, already written out, handed to him like a courtesy. Wyatt burned that paper in a coffee can behind his house. He died in 2017 of a heart attack. Never once told a single soul outside of me what we saw. I don't know what that thing was, but I know this much. The thing on that dirt road wanted the deer, not us. The men in the sedan, they were there for us. And they made damn sure we understood that neither the creature nor whatever followed behind it was supposed to become public knowledge. Harlan, 1982, Mississippi. Hello. My name is Bill. I'm not proud of how I handled myself during all this, and if anyone from my family hears this, I'd rather they not recognize the name. This happened back in 1978 when I was 24. I was hauling oil field equipment between Douglas and Gillette, Wyoming. Back then, the roads weren't anything like they are now. Long stretches with little to no traffic, no houses in sight, just open country and wind that could push a 2-ton truck sideways without an apology. I drove an old '69 International Transtar that my company barely kept roadworthy. No radio worth a damn, no CB that didn't cut out every 10 minutes, and a headlight that flickered if you hit a bump the wrong way. It was late October. I was making a run north on a 2-lane highway just after midnight. I was trying to get to Gillette before the weather turned on me. The wind was dying for no reason, and the quiet became its own kind of warning. About 20 miles north of Douglas, I saw something lying on the shoulder. At first, I thought it was a cow because of how big it was. I got closer, and it got bigger. I thought it was a horse. Then I realized it wasn't either. It was a bull elk, a big one, lying crumpled on its side like it had been slammed there. The weird part was the body angle. Elk don't fold up like that from a car hits. I'd seen enough roadside kills to know the way legs bend when a vehicle clips them. The elk looked dropped, like something had lifted it straight up and just threw it down as hard as it could with some kind of strength I can't even understand. I slowed the truck and rolled the window down. The cold cut through me like a blade. I could smell something. Fresh iron, dirt, wet fur. That was normal enough for an animal kill, I suppose. What wasn't normal was the way the elk's neck was completely twisted backward, almost completely around. No way a car did that. As I inched past, my headlights caught movement on the far side of the ditch. Just a shape at first. It instantly stood up. Well, standing wasn't really the right word. It rose, like a man getting up from a crouch, but it was way too tall. I'll tell it as straight as I can, buddy. It had the chest and shoulders of a man who spent his life lifting railroad ties. It was covered in thick fur that looked black in some spots and silver in others, depending on the angle. Its arms hung longer than anything I've ever seen. It had hands down near the knees. The legs were bent wrong for a human. But the head was definitely all animal, like a wolf's head on a man's body. Long snout, ears sharp and up. I could see teeth visible even without it snarling or growling. The thing stepped into the highway like it didn't even care or know that I was there. I swerved so hard the truck nearly fishtailed. It closed the distance in 3 steps. I didn't even have time to think. Just instinct. Hit the gas and pray the old truck held together. I heard it hit the tail end of the trailer once, a loud, metallic wham that shook the entire rig. I don't know if it jumped or swung an arm, but the impact sent me slamming forward into the steering wheel. Without being able to stop myself, I looked in the mirror. It was running after me on two legs, then dropped to all fours like a wolf mid-sprint, then back upright again. This thing was constantly switching between gates. I pushed the truck harder. The speedometer needle wobbled past 70. I finally hit 80. I didn't even think the rig could even do 80, but the thing kept up for far too long. Long enough to make me question whether I was awake or having a nightmare. Finally, and to this day I don't know why, it broke off. It just peeled sideways into the dark, one last flash of silver fur before it was gone completely. I drove another mile before my hands stopped shaking enough to pull over at a small turnout. That's when the lights showed up. Not passing traffic. This wasn't some local. A pair of bright white headlights from behind me, moving fast. The vehicle that pulled up wasn't a sheriff's car, wasn't a rancher. It was a tan Suburban, huge antenna on the bumper, dark-tinted windows, the kind government folks used back then. Two men got out. Both were wearing these plain brown heavy jackets. One had a beard, one had a mustache. Both looked like federal types trying to look rugged. The bearded one walked up first. His tone wasn't friendly, not even curious. He asked me if I was the driver. I was a little cocky back then, so I said, "Well, no shit." "How did you guess?" And I said something attacked my rig back there. He looked at the side of my trailer where the metal was dented inward like something punched it. He ran his glove over it, nodded once, and then turned back to me. "You hit an elk." "I didn't hit anything." He said, "Yes, you did." He wasn't arguing, he was giving me instructions. The other man circled my truck without speaking. He had a small metal case with him. Looked like one of those portable kits that veterinarians use when they're checking sick cattle. He opened it and pulled out this giant, long cotton swab. He reached toward the dent in my trailer. I stepped forward and said, "What in the hell are you doing?" He just ignored me. He wiped the metal, examined the swab for a second, and put it into this little vial. He just walked to my front tire and did the same thing. The bearded one asked me, "Did you get out of the vehicle before we arrived?" I said, "No." "Did you touch the animal?" "What animal?" He stared at me for far too long. Then he said, "Good. Let's just keep it that way." He asked me for my license. He wrote down my info in a little notebook. Then he said something that blew my mind. "You're going to tell your supervisor that the elk panicked, ran into the road, and you swerved. No damage except cosmetic. No incident to report." Sound good? I started to argue, but he stepped in so close I could smell his aftershave. "You understand," he repeated to me again. I just nodded. I was getting a very bad vibe from these fellas. It wasn't because I agreed, because something in his eyes told me that refusing his instructions would not end well for me. They just told me to get back in my truck and follow them back toward Douglas. I did as I was told. Near the county line, they pulled off. I slowed, thinking maybe they wanted me to stop and talk again. They just waved me on. But as I passed, the mustache guy pointed at me, 2 fingers to his eyes, then at me. The kind of gesture that means we saw you, and we'll keep seeing you. Back in Douglas, I went straight to the company yard. The night manager came out, looked at the dent, shook his head, and said, "A damn elk, huh?" I didn't even say anything. He handed me paperwork someone had dropped off earlier that night. It was already filled out. It was signed at the bottom, D. Wilkins, Field Supervisor. We didn't have a field supervisor named Wilkins. I still have that paper somewhere. My rig was taken out of service for 3 days for inspection. When it came back, the dent was gone. Replaced panel, fresh welds, scratches had been buffed out. No one even said who fixed it. There was no invoice, no explanation. I asked the mechanic what he thought the damage looked like. He just shrugged and said like something hit it. From the side. Hard. And he looked at me close and said, "Too damn hard for a deer." Then he shut up, walked away, and didn't talk to me the rest of the week. 2 months later, a different supervisor called me into his office. He said a man from a federal office had asked for my work schedule, wanted to confirm where I'd been the night of the incident. Then he added, "They told me not to quiz you about it, so I won't." That was all I needed to hear. In 1979, I quit trucking and moved to Montana. I haven't driven a rig since. Whatever ran into my truck that night, whatever chased me down that highway, the government didn't want me to know what it was, and they sure as hell didn't want me talking about it. For years, many years, I didn't know what it was. But in the past 10 years, I've finally come to realize that was a Dogman. I'm sure of it. Thank you for your time. Bill, Wyoming, 1978. R.A. I was 31 when this happened. I'm pushing 65 now. I've never told a soul, except my wife, and she still won't talk about it. This happened in the fall of 1989 up near Uncomgagray in western Colorado. Back then I worked for the county road department, doing everything from plowing to maintenance on the mountain pull-offs. Hunting was the only real hobby I had. Elk, mule deer, didn't matter. If it was in season, I was in the woods before the sun ever had a chance to come up. My encounter, I don't even like calling it that. It feels like it wasn't an encounter. It was a predation attempt, and I was the one being sized up. I'd set up a little wall tent on a ridge I liked, maybe a mile off a road. This place you could only reach on foot, no ATVs back then. I hiked in the day before to get an early start on what I hoped would be a 3-day elk hunt. That evening was quiet. It was too quiet. It wasn't no animals quiet, just this strange sort of emptiness in the air. Like noise just couldn't cross the tree line. It was very strange. I've never experienced it before that day, nor after. I cooked some beans. I had a small cup of whiskey. I rolled out my bag and tried to settle in. The moon was bright that night, and at around 2 in the morning I woke straight up like someone had jolted me. I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't hearing a sound. It was just a bolt of cold running through me like a warning. My first thought was, mountain lion. I'd been stalked before. You feel that instinctive tension like prey. I slipped my boots on, unzipped the wall tent part way, and listened. I heard not a sound. The wind wasn't even blowing. I started hearing a soft crunch of ground about 50 yards off, or so it sounded. I grabbed my flashlight, one of those old heavy mag lights that doubled as a club. I stepped out slowly. The moment I turned that light on and shined it past the trees, something was crouched downhill from me. It didn't seem to be trying to hide. It was just sitting there. Its outline didn't make sense at first. It was too big, too tall, too broad. The head was too narrow, too long. The eyes, they didn't shine like a animal's eyes. They reflected differently, flat, pale, almost like the pupils were wide open and swallowing all the light. This thing never blinked, it never flinched. I remember whispering to myself, "That's not real," over and over. Then I watched it stand all the way up. It wasn't like a man, or what some people would say is a bear. Something in between that was built stronger than both. The legs bent forward, then straightened completely. The spine uncoiled upward. The silhouette went from crouched to towering. This thing was over 8 feet, if it was 3 inches. It took one step toward me. It didn't make any sound. It didn't show any hesitation at all. My fight instinct did not trigger. It wasn't fear. It was something deeper, something ancient in my bones that was screaming at me to run. I backed into the tent, grabbed my rifle. It was a beat-up .308, and as soon as I chambered around, I heard breathing just outside the canvas. Just this low, rhythmic inhale and exhale, like it was almost smelling the air through the tent wall. The outline was pressing against the canvas. I aimed directly at it. And then came a loud snap. Something startled it. It turned quickly, letting out a growl that I will take to my grave. Something that sounded like a bark and a grunt mixed with a noise that would come from a lion. It was quick and sounded very irritated, like whatever made that noise wasn't aimed at me anymore. It ran uphill, and I mean flew uphill, so fast the branches barely moved. A minute later, I heard engines, multiple engines. I crawled out of my tent just enough to see lights between the trees. 3 sets of headlights, coming up that forest road. They weren't police trucks or cars. These weren't ranger rigs either. They were gray trucks, full size. No county markings, no Forest Service logos, there was nothing. One had a big metal storage box in the bed. All 3 had whip antennas bouncing as they crawled over the ruts. I stepped out completely then, my rifle lowered but still visible. One of the trucks stopped. Flashlights cut through the dark immediately. Too bright for the era's standard county flashlights. These were brighter than any I'd ever seen. A man shouted for me to stay where I was. There was no hello or are you all right? Just instructions. Cold instructions. 4 men stepped out. Heavy jackets. No uniforms, no badges. They were heavily armed. One had a radio handset clipped to his shoulder with no agency tag. Another carried a case that I recognized. It was a tranquilizer case, the same kind that wildlife services used for problem bears. But these men were not wildlife services. The one in front, he was maybe in his 50s. He walked up with a practiced calm. He said, "You need to pack up your things. Now. This area is being closed off." I asked him for what reason. He just said, "That's none of your concern. Just know that it's being closed, and you need to go." I pointed downhill and tried to tell him something was out there, but he cut me off. "You were not harmed. That's what matters." The other man, the one with the tranquilizer case, walked past me without even looking up. He was shining his own light at the tracks around my tent. He knelt down and pressed something metallic into the dirt, and then nodded to the older guy. The older one said, "We'll escort you down the mountain." I asked him what it was that I just saw. I shouldn't have, but I did. He looked at me a very long time, showed no change in expression. He was studying me. He said, "You saw movement and shadows, nothing else." I tried to protest, but he kept saying that's all you saw. Every time I would speak, he would cut me off. The way he said that just froze me in my spot. It wasn't him making a suggestion. It wasn't encouragement. It was final. He also told me, "You're going to break camp, follow our lead truck, and you're never going to hike or camp on this ridge again." Understood. I asked if something was dangerous out here, even though I knew 'cause I'd just encountered it. It obviously did not want to sit by the fire and make s'mores with me. That was a given. But I never got an answer from him. He turned and told his men, "Mark it and sweep until sunrise." They all quickly fanned out with their equipment that didn't look like anything state or federal hunters used back then. They were carrying long metal rods, what looked like antenna grids, and a bulky device one man wore on his chest with a blinking red light. I still have no idea what that was. I can only assume it was some sort of tracking device. These guys knew something. They just popped up out of nowhere. They had to have known what this creature was, and they almost had to have had some sort of tag on it. If not, how would they have arrived so quickly? None of it makes any sense, really. I was informed to not speak about this to anyone, that this is not something the public needs to be confused about. Accidents happen when the wrong people talk. He told me, "Consider yourself lucky." It was distracted before it finished. I nearly dropped my gun and had to pick my chin up off the ground. He didn't even ask what it was. He didn't deny anything. He didn't even soften it. He simply acknowledged that whatever stalked me was known to them, and that I lived by chance. At dawn, they escorted me down the mountain, one truck ahead and one behind. When we reached the gate, they stopped me and handed me a folded piece of paper, typed, official-looking paper. It said, "The closure was due to hazardous wildlife conditions. No recreational access in the future." It had no signatures, no contact info, just that message. A week later, the gate was padlocked and a brand new sign went up. All it said was, "Area closed. Do not enter." And there was another sign that said something. I can't really recall the exact thing, but I remember something about eradication program. I never camped in Colorado again. I never set foot on or near that ridge. I never forgot what happened that night. Who would? I never forgot the man's final words before they sent me home either. He told me the next time, if there was a next time, it might not lose interest so easily. He kept telling me how lucky I was and how most people don't walk away from these situations. I don't really know what to make of all this. I've never known how to answer my questions. I don't think anyone else can answer them either, but people need to be aware of what's going on around them. The world is not as it seems. Colorado. Reels. I'm very happy that you informed me that you would be putting my email up on the channel. I think people definitely would want and need to hear this. You can call me Paul D. I'm 72, and this was when I was 22 back in the fall of 1975. It was outside Bedford County, Virginia. Of course, there were no cell phones, no GPS. It was just me, a cheap Winchester, and a gas lantern that never stayed lit long enough. I should say this before anything else. I didn't go into those woods looking for trouble. I wasn't hunting, I wasn't camping. I wasn't even supposed to be there. I was a mechanic back then, working out of a little cinder block shop behind my dad's house. A local farmer hired me to tow out an old Ford pickup that had gotten stuck off a fire road. He said it was just off a logging spur he used occasionally. He told me the truck had been sitting there for a week because every time he tried to get close, he would encounter something, some type of wildlife, something big that he couldn't describe. Said it was moving in the timber, but he would always get spooked and leave. I didn't take that seriously. People exaggerate when they're frustrated or scared. I wasn't scared of any wildlife in the area. So I drove out on a Friday around sunset, pulling my dad's old tow dolly behind my GMC pickup. The sky was already starting to darken, and the weather seemed to be changing. The December air was a bit cold. I remember it well. The fire road was pretty narrow, and it was all rutted out, overgrown in most spots. There were no tracks, no tire marks. The farmer hadn't been lying. Nobody had driven it in some time. The first hint of trouble was how quiet it was. I know you hear this a lot, but this is something that people should pay attention to. Virginia woods always have something talking. Owls, dogs off in the distance, but on that night, there was nothing. I found the farmer's truck exactly where he said it would be. It was halfway slid off the road, nose down in a ditch. Looked like the front axle had snapped after hitting a rock. I parked, grabbed my lantern, and walked over to see what angle I'd need to pull it out. As soon as I leaned under the front bumper, I smelled something. Not rot, not garbage. It was a musky, damp animal smell. It reminded me of being close to a coyote den. If anyone smelled that, then you'll know what I mean. It was a lot stronger, though. It was definitely something that would make you gag. There was a heaviness to it as well. The smell hit the back of my throat. I remember thinking, man, something big has bedded down here. I was thinking it was probably a bear. When I shined my lantern under the truck, I saw something sticking out from under the frame. It was this elongated track. It was wide at the ball of the foot, narrowing near the heel. At the front were 3 deep indentations like thick toes or some kind of canine pad. It looked like it had claws that had dropped and sunk into the mud. It was pressed in pretty far, so whatever made it was definitely heavy. I got chills so fast I felt my scalp tighten and tingle. Before I could even get back up, something hit the back of that stranded truck, and I mean it hit it hard. The metal frame let out a boom that went straight through my chest. I turned around with the lantern raised, but the light flickered and went out. I was plunged into total darkness. I could hear something moving around the passenger side of the truck. It wasn't moving fast, but it was approaching me nonetheless. I backed up toward my truck, nearly tripping over the dolly hitch. My heart was kicking my ribs like it wanted out of my chest. The lantern finally flicked back on for just a second or two. long enough to show me what I was facing out there. A tall, hunched silhouette leaning around the side of the truck. Something with a long forearm bracing against the hood. The shoulders were too wide, too big for a bear. The legs were too long for anything else. Its head was huge and the jaws were too long. It was like the mouth stretched farther than it should have. The eyes were just visible and fixed flat, watching me. The lantern, of course, went out again. That's when I heard it start moving. It seemed to not move while the light was shining. It preferred to only move in the dark. It was rushing forward like it was trying to close the distance before I could even run. I didn't think. I didn't make a plan. I didn't try to grab the rifle in my truck. I dove headfirst into my truck, immediately slamming the door and locking it. Something rammed the side of the truck instantly, as soon as the door was closed. It was a very heavy hit, like a shoulder or someone just ramming their full body into the truck at full speed. The whole truck rocked sideways. I put the key in and started the truck, praying it wouldn't stall or flood. It started, but barely. I put it in reverse and took off. Whatever was outside took 3 steps, and I felt them through the floor pan. Then something yanked upward on the back, the bed of the truck so hard, the back end lifted. I started screaming. It was not even something I thought to do. It just came out. I'm not ashamed of it. I've never felt fear like that before. I tried to press the gas, but this thing was so strong it had the back end of the truck all the way off the ground. It finally slammed back down and the truck broke free. I never looked back. I just drove until I saw the light of the paved road, and I didn't stop until I was a mile down it. I pulled into the parking lot of a small post office. I was trying to settle down and keep my chest from burning. I was very confused, obviously. Who wouldn't be in this situation? I'm still pretty confused, many years later. That's when the second nightmare started. The actual one, really. A white pickup pulled in behind me. This was a new-looking, clean, plain white with no plates. 2 men got out of the truck. They were both wearing suits and calm, too calm. I had no idea what they wanted or who they were. They approached my window, and one of them said, "You've been on Fire Road 6C tonight." He didn't even say this like he was asking. It's like he already knew. I told him, yeah, I had nothing to hide, and he nodded like he'd expected that answer. "You need to hand me whatever clothing or tools that came into contact with the ground." I told him I didn't have anything. He stared at me long enough that I had to look away. I couldn't hold eye contact with this person. He almost felt non-human. He walked around the truck and inspected the dent the creature had left. He found scratch marks. The paint was scraped. The bed was completely warped and almost ripped off the frame. The younger one of the two said something to him that I couldn't hear. The other one replied, "Document it. Document everything." He pulled out an old Polaroid camera and took 3 pictures. My truck, the tires, and the dent on the bed. He just walked back to my window and told me that I was going home. I was not speaking about this to anyone. Not my family, not the neighbors, not anyone. I asked him why. He told me because you didn't see what you think you saw. I told him I didn't know exactly what the hell I had just seen. But he was adamant that what I had seen was a bear, and that was it. But I didn't need to talk about it, because it would cause some sort of panic. People would think there was a rogue, aggressive bear in the area. That wasn't needed. No need for panic. He dictated reality. Then he told me the road will be closed by morning. There would be no need to go back. They would handle getting the truck out for whoever it belonged to. So the next day I drove back toward that road out of curiosity. Not all the way, just near the entrance. I didn't want to piss these guys off. They seemed like people you would not want to anger. There were 3 trucks out there. One was county, one was definitely federal, and the white pickup I'd seen the night before. There was a fresh chain across the gate. There was no signs, it was just completely gated off. It was something to do with some sort of federal operation. These guys were definitely not local. I don't know, I'm not going to say if they were FBI or CIA or whatever, but they were definitely above the county or state police. The farmer left town the next month, sold everything, moved to Tennessee. I stayed a few more years, but the woods just never felt the same again. Never have since. It felt like something was always watching me, and not the creature itself, just alone. Something else. Something human. I left Virginia in 1981. I never went back to that county. Never went out there. Not hunting, not camping, not to fetch a truck. I would go for no reason. Whatever was out there in those woods wasn't meant for ordinary people like us to see. And the men who showed up didn't care whether I lived or died. Only that I kept my mouth shut. Paul D. I'll make this as short as possible, but that doesn't make it not important for people to know. Just call me Calder. Anyone back home hearing this story will know exactly who I am, and I don't want that. Not because I'm terrified or anything. I don't care if someone calls me crazy. I've grown used to that. It's because I don't want the wrong people remembering my name. I don't want to stir up trouble unnecessarily. This happened in 1995 along the Texas-New Mexico border, near a dry stretch of desert where nobody goes unless they're working cattle, working oil, or running drugs. I was 29, working night shifts on a pipeline inspection team. I was just walking lines, checking the valves, and logging pressure changes on an old manual sheet. My partner on nights back then was a guy named Silas. He was older than me by almost 10 years. This guy was tough as worn leather. The only person I trusted on those lonely desert runs. We worked a section known as the washouts, where flash floods carved deep trenches under the pipe. Our job was simple. Walk the line with flashlights and listen for leaks or pressure changes. Now, if you're not familiar with nights in the desert, they'll do things to your head. Sound feels different. Distance feels different. Even time itself can feel different. You shine your light out across the sagebrush and suddenly it seems like the world ends 20 feet away. Just empty space as far as you can see. That night, the one I can't forget. We started around 10:30, walking a 3-mile stretch. Silas carried the inspection clipboard. I carried an old Ruger 357, standard in those days because There were wild hogs, feral dogs, and the occasional cougar out there. About an hour into the shift, we heard something that made us both stop in our tracks. We heard a short, sharp whoop from the darkness to our right. And no, before anyone suggests it wasn't an owl or a coyote, this was a sound that neither of us had ever heard in the desert, or anywhere else for that matter. Silas shined his light toward the sound. We saw no signs of any movement or anything alive. We kept walking. A few minutes later, that whoop came again. It seemed as though it got closer the second time. Then we heard a second whoop, answering the first one from farther out. Silas just whispered my name and told me we were being flanked. He wasn't the type to get spooked. When he said that, I felt it in my bones. It was happening. We took off walking a bit faster, heading toward a washout area shaped like a big bowl, carved. The pipe ran right along the rim. With the moon out, you could see the whole basin. The earth was all cracked open. There was dead mesquite and rocks as big as cars. That's where we was hit by the smell. Rotten meat, something like iron or rust mixed in with decay. I immediately gagged. Silas covered his nose with his sleeve. I asked, maybe a dead cow. He said no, that's something else. And he damn sure was right. Because right then something in that basin stood up. I saw it because the moon hit its outline just from the right angle. This wasn't a shadow or a blur. It was an upright figure near the far edge of the wash. This thing was very broad. I'm 6 foot. This thing looked like it was nearly twice my height. I'm serious. Its arms were long enough that the hands hung down lower than the knees. The way it held itself wasn't human. It didn't twitch like prey. It didn't pace like a predator. This thing simply observed us and our movements. The head turned toward us slow, like it had already known we were there but wanted us to know it too. Silas whispered to me not to move, but I already had the flashlight on it. As soon as the beam hit its chest, a thick wall of muscle covered in fur that looked black at the roots and gray around the edges. This thing's shoulders were beyond massive, twice as wide as a man, but the waist tapered like this thing was very athletic. It was built for speed, not bulk. God help me, its face looked like a wolf that had learned how to stand, but it was different in small ways that I can't explain here. The snout was a bit shorter. The jaw was pretty wide. The teeth were very uneven. Its eyes, if you're wondering, were nothing supernatural or glowing. I didn't even see any reflection. All I saw were black sunken holes in its face. Silas told me to back away, but don't run. Just back away slowly. We hadn't taken no more than 2 steps, and then another voice, not a human voice, echoed from behind us. It was a deep, vibrating grunt. This thing was way too close. Every hair on my body stood on end. We slowly turned, expecting to face another one of whatever we'd just seen. And sure enough, another one stood 10 yards behind us, up on the ridge. My knees almost buckled. I'd never known an animal that moved without making sounds. Never known one that got that close without us hearing a single step. Not to mention being nearly 12 foot tall. We were surrounded. He told me if they rush us, Shoot the one on the right. I'll take the left." He pulled out his revolver. This was the only time I've ever seen this man shake. The one in the basin let out a low, pulsing growl that vibrated the ground. The one behind us responded with a short, clicking noise that seemed to come in threes and fours. All at once, the one behind us charged. I didn't think, I just fired. The shot echoed and my ears were ringing. It didn't even slow down. I remember Silas fired 2 shots. It staggered and I saw blood spray, but it just kept coming. It hit Silas first. This was not a pounce or a normal animal attack. This was a full-on collision, like a moving car made of claws, teeth, and bone. They both tumbled into the washout. I heard the sickening crunch of something breaking bone. Metal, I don't know. I ran toward the edge, screaming. What I saw down there, I still can't describe without getting shook up. The creature had him pinned to the ground. It wasn't attacking him, it was just holding him down with its weight, staring at his face like it was deciding what to break first. Then the other one slid down the slope behind them, moving almost gracefully despite its size. It didn't join the attack. It stood near Silas's boots and tilted its head like it wanted to watch and see which part of him would stop moving first. Silas looked up at me, his eyes as wide as dinner plates. I swear to God, he mouthed for me to run. I didn't want to. I wanted to jump in and grab him, but the sound that came out of that first creature's throat, almost a mechanical sound, it broke something inside of me. Something in my brain said, if you go down there, you die too. I'm ashamed, but I ran. The guilt is almost too much. Throughout the years, I have nearly thought about ending it a few times. I didn't get very far anyway, because within seconds, I'm talking maybe 15 at the most, headlights lit up the ridge. There were 3 vehicles. I could see 3 sets of lights. They were all moving fast in my direction. One of them had this weird dome-shaped antenna on top that I'd never seen before. Men jumped out before the trucks even stopped. These guys moved like special forces or something. They were very quiet and coordinated. They didn't yell, they didn't freeze, they didn't panic. They acted like they had done this before. One man pointed at me and shouted, "Get this guy secured." Another group ran straight toward the washout with some type of rifles. I tried to scream for them to help Silas, but someone grabbed me by the shoulders and dragged me backwards toward the trucks. I kept screaming, telling them my friend's down there. It's killing him. Do something. A man with a beard leaned close and told me, "It's already over. Look at me, son. It's over." I fought him until I couldn't move, but he pinned me against the hood of one of the vehicles with strength that did not match this man's size. It was almost superhuman. I've never felt anyone that strong before. The worst moment of my life, I heard a single gunshot from down in that wash. A man screamed. He's neutralized. Not it, not the creature. He. One of the other agents turned to the man holding me and told him, "Tell him his partner discharged his weapon and he panicked. He fell into the wash and broke his neck. It's clean enough." I screamed until I'd lost my voice. The bearded man tightened his grip. He got angry. I can't recite word for word. It's been too long. But I can tell you exactly what he meant. Basically, listen to me. You were never here. You didn't see a thing. You didn't hear anything. And if you ever open your mouth about this, you won't have the chance to regret it. They kept me there until the sun started to come up. They took my gun. They took my light. They took the inspection logs. They even took my shirt that had blood on it. They drove me back to the pipeline operations yard and dropped me off like I was a bag of trash. Silas's death certificate says accidental fall, cervical fracture. I saw what killed him, and it wasn't gravity. For 30 years, I've had to live with the memory that I ran when I shouldn't have, and the knowledge that the men who showed up afterward, they knew what they were walking in on. They weren't shocked about this. They weren't confused at all. These men were prepared to face what was there. I still don't know how they just showed up out of nowhere. It's like they already knew these things were out there and were keeping a close eye on them. It's like they knew exactly how to keep all this swept under the rug. And being as these things keep happening and nothing is done, I guess they're pretty good at doing that, huh? Anyway, that's about all I'm willing to share here. I did have another incident years later, but that's for another time. Calder. Reels. I've been called a liar many times because of this. This is a different type of email that you're probably used to. Or hell, I don't know. Maybe you are. I'm sure you get to read a lot of weird things. Anyways, my name is Rhett. I'm 61, and this was back when I was 20, maybe 21 at the most. I was working for Wyoming Department of Transportation as a low-level grunt, flagging, sweeping shoulders, patching cracks. In the fall of '84, I got assigned to a stretch of highway near the Shoshone National Forest. The area had been getting rock slides, so we were clearing debris and running a sweeper truck through the shoulders. It was later in the evening, so it was starting to get dark. My foreman, Dave, was out running the main sweeper duty while I was handling the groundwork. I was clearing the loose rock with a shovel and tossing it down the embankment so the sweeper could get through. There was nothing happening. Normal at first. Just the trucks, the forest sounds, the occasional coyote somewhere far off. Then everything just stopped. I mean everything. It's like someone shut a door that blocked all the sounds. Even the insects stopped. I could still hear the engine of the trucks, but the sound felt muffled, like I was stuffing cotton in my ears. I remember looking over my shoulder and thinking something was behind me. Before I could even figure out or process any type of fear, I saw something run across the highway 20 yards in front of me. And I do mean run. This thing was fast. It blasted from one side of the street to the other in 3 strides or less. I barely saw it with the corner of my light. It was upright. It was definitely massive in size, and it moved like an Olympic sprinter dodging bullets. I screamed out and said, "Did you see that?" Dave didn't even slow the truck down. He just yelled back, "Get in the cab, now." He never yelled. Ever. I climbed into the sweeper. Dave didn't even look at me, just white-knuckled the wheel and told me we shouldn't have been out here tonight. I said, "Was that a bear?" He gave me a look that I can't forget. The look of a man realizing someone else finally saw what he's been scared of for years. That ain't no bear." Before I could ask what he meant, something hit the side of the sweeper truck, and I mean hard. The whole thing rocked. I heard the glass sound like it cracked. I think it flexed the entire frame of the vehicle. Dave yelled at me to hold on and floored it before he was finished screaming. He made it maybe 50 yards before something hit the truck again. It hit it in the back corner of the bed and nearly pushed it off the road like it weighed nothing. I turned in my seat just in time to see a shape. It was hunched, towering over the truck, broad enough to block out the truck's rear floodlight. Its shoulders were wider than the hood of the sweeper. Its head was wolf-like, and it was snarling, but not like an animal would. It was more like a gurgling growl mixed with a rattling hum sound. It was low, but you could feel it vibrating your bones. It was like it was echoing through its chest. It finally backed off a bit, and I could see it. I'll tell you, this thing looked like a giant kangaroo the way it held its front arms like that. That's the best I can describe it. Take a 300-pound kangaroo and stuff a giant timberwolf head on top. The arms were much longer, but the way it was holding them out in front of it with the hands dangling down, that's what it looked like. Dave didn't stop until we got to a turnout almost half a mile away. We both jumped out and ran for the second truck. The supply truck parked farther down the road. It had the radio unit we needed to call dispatch. We didn't get the chance. As soon as Dave lifted the mic, we were flooded by headlights on the road from the north. This wasn't a vehicle. This was a damn convoy. 3 trucks and 2 black Suburbans. The Suburbans didn't even have plates on them. Men piled out wearing heavy jackets. These weren't uniform. 2 had rifles, and I don't mean hunting rifles, but government issued. And they looked like they had suppressors. One of them walked straight to Dave and ripped the radio right out of his hand. I was about to become even more confused, because Dave looked right at this guy and said, "One of those things is back. It slammed into our truck. It tried to kill us." The man didn't even flinch. Another stepped up holding a long black case. I don't know what was inside. I didn't ask. He asked me if I was injured. His voice was emotionless. I shook my head. I was too scared to even talk. He glanced at my flashlight and saw the cracked lens. He said he saw it, didn't he? Bring him over here. 2 of the men escorted me. Not rough, but they were definitely firm, to the back of one of the Suburbans. Inside were maps, radios, and a large metal box with ventilation holes. One guy asked me, "How big was it?" I didn't move. I didn't want to. He tapped my shoulder, grabbed me hard. "Show me." I held my hands apart. He nodded and took down some notes on his pad that looked military issue. He told me not to talk about it, not about what I saw. He told me not to tell my supervisor or coworkers. He said Dave knew about it, and he didn't talk, so it was best if I kept it quiet as well. He told me not to even tell my family, or I would put me and them and everyone else in danger. I just shook my head again, saying nothing. He repeated it slow, with a steady tone that tells you this man means business. He finally kept asking me, "You have to verbally tell me that you understand." I finally spit out, "Yes," that's all I could do. He closed his notebook and told me it's hunting season, and they all got out. That's all this is. I ask what kind of animal that was. Don't finish that sentence. Behind them, the rest of the men began spreading out along the highway shoulder, laying down these weird metal rod things with blinking lights on top. Others were carrying rifles with long barrels and matte black coatings. Someone set up what looked like a portable antenna. The one man screamed out, "We've got heat signatures in the trees." Another yelled back, "There's 2 of them. They're moving away fast." The man who questioned me tapped the side of the Suburban and said, "Get them back to town. Not get them to safety. Just get them out of here." He did not care as long as we were not there. They shoved us into one of the Suburbans, not harsh or mean, just efficient is the word I'd use. They drove us about 5 miles down the highway to a barricade that hadn't been there earlier. Perfect cover to close the road while they did their hunting, as they called it. Rock slide area, of course. They had these huge portable spotlights as well. They opened the door and told us to go home, that our shifts was over. Dave tried to ask questions and tried to argue and get answers. The man shut the door right in his face. He seemed to know these people, but he was trying to get involved more than they were comfortable with. We watched the convoy just go back toward the forest. They didn't even have their lights on. They were moving like a hunt was already underway. The next morning, WYDOT supervisors held a meeting saying that some sort of hazardous chemical leak forced the road closure overnight. That was a total lie, and everyone knew it, but no one tried to fight it. We were all scared to. Our sweeper truck was returned the next week. The side that had been hit was replaced. There was a brand new door, brand new panels, and fresh paint. There was no explanation for anything. And Dave, he just quit 3 days later. He said he was done working nights, done working near the forest, done pretending like we didn't almost die. As for me, I stayed on another year or so, but I never worked another night shift again. I never drove that stretch of highway again. I never forgot the way those government trucks rolled up like they'd been waiting for that creature to show itself. It's like someone called them, like someone expected it. And it's like someone wanted to make damn sure the public never heard a word. Too bad for them. Now, people know. Rhett. Hello, friend. My name is Jonathan, but you can shorten it to John if that makes it easier. It was 1978, which seems like 100 years ago now. I was 22 and stubborn enough to wander the Southwest with a camera and $10 of confidence in my pocket. This was near the Arizona-Texas line area. Back then I was trying to build a portfolio to get into conservation photography. A big dream, little money. So I spent most of my time sleeping in my Jeep and hiking desert canyons from Arizona-Texas borderlands clear down into Big Bend country. If something had fur, feathers, claws, or teeth, I was trying to get a picture of it. That night, the one I've tried to bury for decades, I was camped near the Arroyo, maybe 20 miles west of Van Horn. The sky was so clear that the stars felt close enough you could touch. There was nothing unusual that would make you clutch a rifle or lose sleep. But around midnight, that's when things changed. I stepped out of my Jeep just to look around, thinking maybe a storm was coming in due to the silence, but the sky was empty. That's when I noticed there were these strange footprints near my camp. Now, being as I was used to wildlife and studied a lot, these prints were not something I was familiar with. They looked like a mixture of a dog and a human. They were huge, 7, 8 inches across, but the length wasn't what bothered me. It was the shape. The heel was narrow, the front was wide. They were 4 distinct toe impressions, but elongated like talons had dug down hard into the earth. I crouched down and took a photo. I'll come to find out that was my first mistake. As the flash went off, something out there rose up. It was almost instant, straight upward like it had been crouched watching me, and it used its legs as pistons to stand. This was crazy to witness. I saw the outline of it first. It was just silhouetted against the stars. This was so tall and narrow it didn't even look real. The ears were pointed, the head tapered into a snout. The shoulders, Jesus. They looked like 2 boulders fused under some hide. It sniffed the air once. It turned its head immediately at me, and even from 50 yards away I could feel its look. This thing was staring at me like it had expected company. My brain was screaming to get into the Jeep, so that's what I did. It started circling, a wide circle, a predatory circle. Each pass it came a little closer, a little lower to the ground, a little more angled so its eyes stayed fixed on the windows. Then it broke that pattern. It came running toward the passenger side so fast the sand kicked up in a small explosion. It slammed into the Jeep hard enough that the frame started to flex. The window spiderwebbed as soon as it hit. I dove across the seat as the door bent inward like someone had pulled it with a winch. It made a sound, but the sound wasn't what you'd expect. It wasn't a roar. It was a vibrating rumble that shook something inside my ribs. It almost made me dizzy. It was like a frequency instead of an actual sound. I saw, or heard first, a vehicle approaching. There was actually a flood of them sweeping across the desert and hitting the creature full on. 3 vehicles, old international trucks with square bodies and blacked out plates. Before I could even think about what was happening, men were screaming, "Hold your positions. It's coming around the ridge. Get the darts ready. Watch for a second one." These guys were acting like they were just working a normal job. The creature backed off my Jeep, its head down low. It was baring its teeth. The men did not care or hesitate. 2 fired what looked like tranquilizer rifles. 1 fired something louder, maybe a shotgun, but not for lethal force. Probably a beanbag or some type of specialized round. The creature staggered, twisted, rammed its shoulder into a boulder. It tried to get up the ridge. Another dart hit it, then another. It dropped like a felled tree. Everything went quiet. One of the men walked straight up to my Jeep and yanked the door open. Not to check on me, not to see if I was okay. He instantly snatched my camera. He didn't explain anything, he just took it. Another man stepped up and asked me if it had touched me or hurt me. I said no, it never touched me. He said, "Your hands. Did you touch anything else?" I told him no, and he examined my shirt. He shined a light on my arms. He scraped something off my sleeve using a metal tool and sealed it in a baggie. Another man with white hair, a heavy coat, and his expression looked carved from stone. He approached and told me I was going to report a vehicle collision tomorrow morning, and there was no questions or there was nothing I could say to change that. I said someone needs to tell me what is going on and what that thing is. He just took a slow, annoyed breath. He told me, you don't want to know. You don't need to know. Forget about it. He mentioned the two others. Clear the prints, bag the specimen, sanitize the ridge. I watched as they covered the creature with a canvas tarp, loaded it into the back of one of the trucks like they'd practiced it 100 times. One of the other men knelt down near the Jeep and wiped the claw marks off the door using a chemical-soaked cloth that made the paint bubble. He told me I would forget, that I'd go home and live my life. If you try to come back out here hunting for more, something will happen. You will disappear long before you get close. Then he just tapped the roof of my Jeep twice like a mechanic approving a repair. And he just politely told me to drive safe. They didn't really threaten violence right out, but I knew that's what they meant. They acted like a group of men who had cleaned up this mess before and were tired of explaining themselves to witnesses. Back home the next day, I called the county sheriff just to gauge the reaction. He told me, "You're out there taking pictures of wild animals. One must have hit your vehicle. This is something you'd expect to happen." Before I said a word, before I mentioned the marks, before I described the damage, they already had their story straight. 20 years later, when digital cameras became widespread, I thought about going back out there, but I never have. Didn't have the guts to pull the trigger on it. Those men didn't show up surprised. They showed up very prepared. Whatever that Dogman thing was, it wasn't the first time someone had took pictures of it. It was just the first time I survived taking the picture. John, share this if you want. I think it should be. Friends, legends, family. That's where we're ending it on this one. I'm going to be honest here. These stick with me long after I get finished recording, as I'm sure they do you guys as well. It's not mainly the Dogman anymore. It's the stories here lately with what happens after the sighting or the encounter. These people who show up, the things that get taken, the way these folks were told to keep their mouths shut. That kind of seals the deal for me. I don't think most people understand what it takes to finally talk about something like this. So to the ones who sent these in, thank you. You didn't owe anyone an explanation, but you trusted me with it anyway, and that means a lot. You have my full respect. And listen, if anyone out there has something they've been holding on to, something you don't feel comfortable emailing me, you can send it to my P.O. Box. It's Real Adventures, P.O. Box 45, Morehead, Kentucky, 40351. It's there for one reason only, so you have another way to reach me, if that makes you feel safer. Fan mail is welcome, but it's not expected. No pressure. That's it. Use it if you need it. However you choose to tell your encounter, email, message, or P.O. Box, just know you're not alone, and no one here is going to tear you down for it. Not on my watch. If you got something out of tonight's episode, hit the like button. Please comment, share it around, and subscribe if you haven't already. It makes a bigger difference than people realize, and it keeps this community alive. I appreciate every one of you. Everyone, please stay safe out there. I love you all. Until next time, my friends, watch over your loved ones. Keep your head on a swivel. And as always, good night.